The village of Witherbrook lay tucked deep in a valley, surrounded by ancient trees and forgotten legends. It was the kind of place where people didn't ask too many questions, where the silence of the woods was respected and feared. At the center of the village stood an old stone well, its bricks blackened with age and covered in ivy. No one used it anymore, not since the water turned black decades ago. But the villagers never dared seal it. Because once, a long time ago, someone did. And the screaming never stopped. 17-year-old Marla had lived in Witherbrook her entire life. But like most young people stuck in small towns, she was bored and curious. One evening, as dusk fell and fog rolled in from the trees, her friends dared her to drop a recording device into the well overnight. "Bet you'll catch a ghost whispering your name," joked her friend Callum, nudging her toward the mossy stone edge. With a smirk, she pressed record, tied the device to a rope, and lowered it down into the darkness. They laughed and left. By morning, the laughter would be gone. The next morning, Marla retrieved the device and played it back. At first, it was nothing but dripping water and static. Then came a low whisper. Faint, almost like breathing. "Marla." She froze. Then the voice returned, clearer. "Let me out." The air in her room grew cold. Her dog began barking uncontrollably. And when she looked out her window toward the well, she could swear she saw someone standing beside it. Tall, thin, unmoving. She blinked. Gone. Marla dug through old town records in the library basement, finding an archived journal belonging to a Father Grigsby, the village priest from 1894. The voices come from the well again. They tempt the children, promise them secrets. We sealed it once, but it was not enough. Something lives beneath. We sent Father Eli down to bless the water. He never came back up. The journal ended there, pages stained with what looked like ink or dried blood. Callum, the friend who dared Marla, didn't show up to school the next day. His mother swore he left for class that morning. His bike was still chained to the school fence. Marla's phone buzzed with a voicemail from Callum. The timestamp said it was sent at 3:03 a.m. All it said was, "It's not a well, it's a mouth." Driven by guilt and fear, Marla returned to the well with a flashlight, rope, and a plan to descend. Everyone warned her not to, but they didn't know what she knew. Something was calling her, not just her name, but her blood. Inside the well, the walls turned from stone to smooth, fleshy red. The bricks pulsed, her flashlight flickered, and then she heard Callum's voice. "You shouldn't have come." She dropped the light. In the glow, she saw dozens of eyes lining the wall, blinking in unison. A long tongue unfurled from below. It wasn't a well at all. It was alive and hungry. At the bottom of the well was a shrine of bones, tangled in roots and wet stone, and at its center, sitting cross-legged, was a child, or what used to be a child. Its skin was stretched too tight. Its eyes were milky. It whispered even though its mouth didn't move. "They fed me. You brought me back. Now, we trade." Marla was given a choice. Bring one, just one person each year, to the well, and Witherbrook would thrive, crops would grow, children would be healthy, no one would die young, or refuse, and everyone in the village would feel what it was to starve, to rot, to drown in black water. Marla climbed out. She said nothing to anyone. But from that year on, someone went missing every fall. A hiker, a drifter, a new teacher, and Witherbrook prospered. Marla is older now, a respected figure in Witherbrook, owns the local bookstore, attends council meetings. No one questions her anymore. No one goes near the well. And once a year, on the coldest night, she takes a walk with someone no one will miss. The well is always waiting, and it always whispers, "Thank you." Tucked in the craggy hills of northern England, the village of Duskmore sat cloaked in fog nearly year-round. The locals said the sun had abandoned them long ago, traded for gray skies and long shadows. At the center of Duskmore stood a crumbling stone chapel, its bell tower silent for over 30 years. No priest, no prayers, only dust and ivy climbing the steeple like fingers trying to pull it down. But some nights, as the fog rolled in heavy, villagers swore they could hear the bell ring. Just once, and always before someone died. Thomas Wren, now 31, hadn't set foot in Duskmore since he was 12. After his parents died in a fire the villagers called an accident, he was sent to live with distant relatives. Now, decades later, a mysterious letter brought him back. Return home. The bell has started again. The note was unsigned. Thomas remembered that bell. It rang the night his house burned down. It rang the night his childhood friend Lydia was found in the chapel with her wrists slit open. The bell had always rung for the dead. Determined to face the past, Thomas climbed the chapel tower. The bell, covered in dust and cobwebs, looked untouched. The rope lay rotted on the floor. But something else caught his eye. A strange mark etched into the bell's bronze flank. A sigil, carved crudely, still wet with black sap. He heard footsteps behind him, but when he turned, no one was there, except the bell rope was swaying. That night, Thomas stayed in the crumbling manor his family once owned. In the dark, he dreamed of Lydia. She was crying, whispering something over and over. They made me ring it. They said it would stop the voices. He woke to the sound of the bell tolling once. The next morning, an old man named Gerald Whitlow was found dead in his garden. Heart failure, the coroner said. But the villagers already knew. The bell had chosen again. Thomas confronted the remaining elders of Duskmore, 3 ancient figures who still ran the town council. They told him the truth. Long ago, a sickness came to Duskmore. Children died by the dozens. In desperation, the priest rang the chapel bell for 7 days and nights. On the 7th, a man in black came to the chapel. He said he could save them, but there would be a price. The price? A soul every year. The bell must toll once annually, never more, never less. If it was not rung, the dead would ring it themselves, and take more. Lydia was the last ringer. When the villagers stopped choosing volunteers, they chose her instead. She was just 10. The guilt had consumed Thomas ever since. He had seen the elders lead her into the chapel, but he did nothing. He had been afraid. Now the bell had started again, and no one had rung it. Which meant one thing: the dead are choosing now. Thomas vowed to end it. He returned to the tower, this time to destroy the bell. But the sigil burned bright as he approached, and the air thickened. He saw faces forming in the fog around him, the ones who had rung before. Lydia, his parents, even Gerald, freshly dead. Break the bell, break the seal, they whispered, but pay the toll. He raised an old iron hammer and smashed the bell from its hanging. The sound that erupted wasn't metallic. It was a scream. And then, silence. That night, the fog lifted from Duskmore for the first time in 30 years. The sun rose. No bell tolled. But Thomas never woke up. They found him seated in the chapel pews, eyes open, expression peaceful. In his lap sat the broken bell's clapper, wrapped in a piece of cloth stitched with Lydia's name. The villagers speak of Thomas with reverence. The deaths stopped. The chapel collapsed a year later in a storm. But the stories remain. And sometimes, when the fog rolls in thick and cold, newcomers hear a single distant toll echo through the valley. Just once. And never again. Unless they ignore it. In 2002, the entire village of Blackthorn Hill vanished. All 137 residents gone. No signs of struggle, no bodies, no explanation. The only clue? A tourist's photograph, found on a disposable camera, dropped near the trail leading to the village. In the image, a town square, empty of people, but all the doors were wide open. Then the government sealed off the area, classified it as a landslide zone, but no landslide ever happened. In 2024, a team of 4 university students, Mira, Jonas, Beth, and Luis, set out to make a documentary on the village that disappeared. They ignored the warnings, crossed the rusted fence, and hiked up the long-forgotten trail. Blackthorn Hill sat undisturbed. The buildings were intact, dust-covered but untouched. No decay, no animals. It was as if time had frozen. "It's like they all just got up and walked away," Mira whispered, filming the town square. But she didn't notice the shadow in the second-floor window behind her. They set up camp in the abandoned schoolhouse. That night, Luis heard a knock on the window. Tap, tap, tap. When he looked, there was no one there. Just the swing set slowly swaying, even though there was no wind. At dawn, Mira noticed something terrifying. One of the houses, house number 12 boarded up in their footage, was now open. Inside, a kettle boiled, and the table was set for 4. Blackthorn Hill had an old clock tower that hadn't worked in decades. Jonas, curious, climbed to the top to get an aerial shot. The clock hands were moving, slowly, backward. When he checked the footage later, the tower wasn't in the shot. It was just sky, as if the tower wasn't there. Beth joked that maybe the village wasn't ever real, but Luis, looking pale, said, "There were 5 cups on the table this morning." Beth left her phone recording audio overnight, hidden in the town square. When she played it back, static crackled for hours, until 3:03 a.m. Then came voices, dozens of them, whispering in unison, "We were forgotten, now we remember. You came looking, now you belong." Then a scream, male, probably Jonas, but Jonas was fine, until he wasn't. That evening Jonas disappeared. No sign of struggle, no footprints, no noise. The footage from his GoPro ended abruptly, right as he was entering house number 9. The final frame showed a mirror, and in it, Jonas standing still. But in the reflection, something stood behind him, pale, grinning, and far too tall. Mira, Beth, and Luis searched for Jonas, but each house felt like it was shifting. Doors that were open were closed, rooms duplicated, hallways twisted into each other. They climbed the church steps. Inside was a wall of portraits, framed black and white photos of villagers, and in the last row, freshly added Jonas's photo, smiling. Below it, carved into the wood, "The hill keeps what finds it." Luis wanted out. Beth wanted answers. Mira kept filming. At sunset, they ran, but the trail they came in on was gone. Trees twisted differently. The map no longer matched. The compass spun in circles. Then they saw it. A bonfire in the center of town, and around it, the villagers, silent, standing, eyes hollow. One by one, they raised their arms and pointed at the 3 of them. A voice filled the air, not spoken but heard inside their skulls. 1 stays, 2 leave. Or none do, Beth offered. She had lost her brother 2 years ago and said she had nothing left. Mira and Luis refused, but Beth was already walking toward the fire. She turned once, smiled, then disappeared in the smoke. Mira and Luis were found wandering near the old highway 2 days later, dehydrated and in shock. Their footage was confiscated. They were told Blackthorn Hill didn't exist, but on Mira's phone was a single image, a new portrait wall. And now Beth's photo joined Jonas's, and 5 other blank spaces, as if waiting for the next ones who come looking. The village of Hollow Fields was the kind of place that didn't appear on any modern map. Tucked between forests older than memory and hills that rolled like sleeping giants, it had existed quietly for centuries. There was no signal, no streetlights, and no visitors, not unless they were lost or lured. Each autumn, as the leaves turned crimson and gold, the villagers prepared for the harvest festival, a sacred tradition said to bless the crops and protect the village from the things that live beyond the fields. Outsiders thought it was quaint, but the villagers knew better. The harvest wasn't a celebration, it was an offering. And this year, Clara, a 17-year-old girl from the village, began to question why. Clara had grown up in hollow fields, but something about this year felt off. The air was colder, the sky grayer, and the crows never stopped circling. Her grandfather, once the village storyteller, had fallen ill weeks before and only spoke in riddles now. Don't go near the scarecrow. Don't speak its name. Don't look into its eyes. She thought it was the fever talking, until the villagers began constructing the effigy. It was always the same, a massive scarecrow made of twisted wood, cloth, and bone. Each villager placed something personal inside it, a lock of hair, a trinket, a photograph. When Clara asked why, her mother simply said, "To remind it we remember." The day before the festival, Clara's friend Eli vanished. His parents claimed he had gone to the city, but his packed bags were still in his room. His shoes were by the door. Clara knew something was wrong. Clara followed the path past the cornfields, ignoring the whispers of wind through the stalks that sounded too much like voices. At the edge of the village was the forgotten field, off limits, overgrown, and always shrouded in mist. There, at the center, stood a smaller, older scarecrow, hidden beneath vines. Its head was a rotting sack. Its fingers were real bones. And something pulsed beneath its chest. As Clara stepped closer, a voice rang in her ears, not from outside, but inside her skull. "They fed me. Now I must feast." Clara ran, heart pounding, but the image stayed burned in her mind. The old scarecrow wasn't just a decoration. It was a prison. The villagers gathered in silence. The effigy stood tall, surrounded by unlit torches. Clara tried to speak up, to tell them what she'd seen, but her mother silenced her with a firm hand and a look of deep, ancestral fear. "It's tradition, Clara. We all have to give something. Even you." The flames were lit, and the effigy began to burn. As it did, a low hum filled the air, a sound too deep for human throats. The ground trembled, and in the flames Clara saw a shape move. It stepped out from the cornfields, tall and thin, with limbs that bent the wrong way and a face covered in stitched burlap. Its eyes glowed like dying embers. The harvest spirit had come to claim its due. Clara ran to her grandfather's bedside. He whispered the truth before slipping into unconsciousness. It was once a man, a farmer who fed the village during a famine. When winter stretched too long, the village turned on him, took his land, his food, and finally, his life. They buried him in the field and claimed his crops, but hunger makes monsters of men, and monsters return. The effigy wasn't symbolic. It was a vessel. The offerings weren't blessings. They were sacrifices. And this year Eli had been chosen. Unless Clara stopped it, next year would be her. That night, Clara returned to the forgotten field with a plan. She carried her grandfather's journal, a rusted sickle, and a jar of black salt, an old protection spell buried in folklore. The scarecrow watched her silently. But as she began the ritual to sever its connection to the village, it moved. Faster than anything that tall should move. It spoke with Eli's voice, her mother's voice, every voice it had consumed. "You cannot stop the harvest. You are the seed of the soil." Clara slashed its chest open. Inside, she found a heart made of soil and bone, beating unnaturally. She salted it, wrapped it in cloth, and buried it outside the village boundary. The scarecrow shrieked, not a sound, but 1,000 screams, before crumbling into dust. Hollow fields changed. The air felt lighter. The harvest still came, but the festival didn't. The effigy was never built again. Clara's mother spoke to her again. Eli never returned, but his name was finally spoken aloud. Clara took over her grandfather's cottage, keeping his stories alive. But sometimes, at the edge of the fields, she hears footsteps in the corn. And once a year, on the night the festival used to fall, a single scarecrow appears, standing tall with eyes that glow faintly red, just watching, waiting.